Hi, everyone. We'll get started now. I'm Kate Stoll, Project Director for the Center for Scientific Evidence and Public Issues, or the EPI Center. Our mission is to build trusted relationships between scientific experts and decision makers at all levels of government to make it easier for policymakers to access and incorporate scientific evidence into their decision-making processes. We're part of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, which is the world's largest multidisciplinary scientific society. And we're really excited to be collaborating with the National League of Cities and Taraaz Research to host this webinar. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris Jordan from NLC.
Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you on behalf of the National League of Cities. Thank you all for joining us today. As Kate mentioned, my name is Chris Jordan. I'm a Senior Innovation Specialist at NLC, where I lead our work on emerging tech and data. The National League of Cities represents more than 19,000 cities, towns, and villages across the U.S. We advocate for local leadership. We provide tools, research, and technical assistance to help communities thrive. And we're focused on AI because these technologies may help local governments innovate how they deliver services, engage residents, and manage city operations. We want to ensure cities of all sizes have the knowledge, tools, and policy guidance they need to make informed and responsible choices about how they want to apply emerging technologies in their communities. So with that goal in mind, we're delighted to be partnering with the American Association for the Advancement of Science and Taraaz Research for today's webinar. And with that, I will hand it back to Kate to introduce our first speaker.
All right, video here. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so I'm very excited to introduce Roya Paksad, who is the founder of Taraaz Research, and she's also an AI fellow at Mozilla Foundation. So her bio will be shared in the chat, and I'll keep it short. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Roya.
Many thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm going to share my screen to share a little bit about the work that we have been doing with AAAS and with my other collaborators. Okay. Title of the presentation is Leveraging Procurement for Responsible AI in the Public Sector. In the next 10 minutes, you will hear about the project that we have been doing since June 2024 in collaboration with Cynthia Conti-Cook, who will be joining us during the conversation from Collaborative Research Center for Resilience, and Dr. Kate Stoll, who is our host also from AAAS. The project was funded by Rose Foundation Consumer Privacy Rights Fund. As I mentioned, we started this process in June 2024 until present, and our report will come out in June 2025. However, I have to say that the interest in this project started during the time that Cynthia was at Ford Foundation as a fellow. And we have been collaborating on developing a framework for philanthropists and foundations program officers to be able to vet public sector technology vendors. As we moved forward with our project, we realized that there is so much interest in cities and procurement officers about how to vet public sector technology vendors. So it was not only about philanthropies and foundations, but more about cities and in general in the public sector. And also originally we started with just technology, but then we realized that there's so much interest in AI, and why AI specifically is it's the source of so much interest in how they can vet AI-enabled products. And we realized that although ID systems, software, they have been in place in city infrastructure and service delivery for a long time. But for the past few years, there was so much interest in AI. There's so much interest in smart city initiatives that are enabled with AI. So many of software that originally they were so much deterministic and rule-based, they became AI-enabled, and suddenly they become probabilistic, and they used so much data that they brought up so much conversation about privacy, about citizens' rights, about evaluation, and the software that was deterministic and rule-based. So if you would say, if this, then that, suddenly it became, oh, it's a black box. We don't know why this answer came out from the product. So there was some ambiguity about how the system is working. As a result, so many researchers and city officials themselves, they said that, okay, it looks like there is so much concern about the implication of these systems on citizens' rights. So we have to think about how to vet, what kind of good questions we can ask, what type of clauses it should go into contract for the procurement. So that project, it came out as our conversation and our previous work since 2022. So for this specific project, we focused on cities, and we interviewed city staff members and AI procurement experts who are also going to join us, will be with us after my presentation for our discussion. We also reviewed so many city AI policies, the small, large cities, and also vendors' documents, vendors' fact sheet, information that they provided about their product. And our report will come out in June 2025. So by synthesizing the information that we received from interview and from governments and cities' AI policy and vendors' documents, we came up with 10 themes. And in our report, we describe each theme, and we also offer a case study that it provides an example of what this theme means in practice. And also, we created a recommendation specifically about that theme. But I'm going to just read through these themes. We don't have time to go through every single one, but during our conversation, we will make sure to touch on so many of them. And in our report, we have the full description on all of them and examples from them. So the very first one is about capacity building and knowledge sharing, and how cities, they feel confident about asking right questions from vendors and feel confident about buying AI while knowing that it's going to help their city to be efficient, also to respect their citizens' rights. The second theme was about documentation and disclosure, specifically about third-party dependencies. As so many of you might know, since 2023, and with the boom in generative AI, suddenly there were so many products came out that they promised for efficiency, service delivery, data management, that they were relying on other companies' foundation models, namely ChatGPT, namely Claude, that so many products were built on top of them, and they created these third-party dependencies that I will be talking about that in details shortly. The third theme was about procurement with small vendors versus large vendors, how much leverage city can have when the vendor is small versus the vendor is large and known big tech company. AI demos and pilots was the fourth theme. And as we know and we commend, piloting, testing is very much recommended before implementing of a product. But we realize there are some concerns coming out from piloting itself that in details we talked about that in our report. The fifth theme is about master service agreement and add-on AI features. As I mentioned during the beginning of my talk, so many software, they were not AI enabled when originally that vendor started having contract with the city. And suddenly, because AI can be added as a feature, suddenly the software that you have now, it's AI enabled. So now it left the city officials with the question, should we start the procurement process again? Should we ask the vendor to fill out the fact sheet? What should we do exactly? Or suddenly, what is going to happen when AI is added as feature to the service agreement that already existed with a certain vendor? The sixth theme is about co-ownership and performance-based contracts, that it came up during a conversation we had with city officials, that they are trying to understand how, when they want to build work with a vendor to build an in-house product, or they use or utilize other vendors' products, how they can have this co-ownership with the data, and how they can bring metrics such as transparency, fairness, privacy as a performance metrics in the contract and as a negotiation tool. The seventh one was public engagement in AI procurement, specifically about meaningful engagement as opposed to tokenizing publics in the procurement process and having a checkbox approach. The eighth one is about city workforce and union engagement. When we talk about the stakeholder engagements, usually I myself as a researcher, first I think about public engagement. However, during our conversation with city officials, during reviewing and talking with researchers, we realized that one stakeholder that it's very important in the context of AI is unions and city workforce and how they should be engaged in AI procurement. Ninth is repurposing and function creep. There have been examples that AI is proposed for perhaps benign use case, such as, let's say, pothole detector, and suddenly the same functionality can be repurposed for other functions or other purposes that they might bring higher risk to citizens. For instance, maybe pothole detection can be reused for homeless encampment detection tool or something like that, and what it means from procurement perspective. Model AI contracts and templates, what are some of the benefits of that and what are some of the challenges is the last theme in our report. As I mentioned, I will not go through all of the themes, although we will touch on them during our conversation, but I just wanted to show some of the examples of use cases about these different themes. The first one is about documentation and disclosure of vendors. So of course, when city officials, they want to buy a product, they ask vendors to submit their documents, disclosure information about the AI systems that they want to sell, information about training data, testing data, evaluation, environmental aspect. But sometimes, because there is a lack of a standardization in the information that vendors are required to submit, so vendors, they selectively disclose some information and they do not disclose other information. And if procurement officers, they don't have this standardized templates, or they don't have the enough knowledge about the certain AI products and what are some of the social, human rights and citizens' rights impact, they might not ask questions about the information that is not disclosed. During our work, we realized GovAI Coalition, they created vendor fact sheets that if they are filled out meaningfully, they give or they bring these types of a standardization to disclosure from vendors. Also, vendors, sometimes they use jargon, technical terms that might be intimidating to city officials to ask about that. Hey, you're talking about recall is 90%, you're talking about false positive is this much, that much. What does that mean? What it means for this community when you talk about your recall and precision in a way that it's very quantitative, deterministic, it's very technical metric. So these are some of the challenges that perhaps city officials, they might face when they read the fact sheet and they see that the information is there, but what is the interpretation of that information? The other issue that it came up very frequently when we were reviewing fact sheets is about third-party dependency. And this is specifically applies particularly to AI products that are built, Gen AI products, generative AI products that are built on top of foundation models by other companies. For instance, a third-party company, vendor, it comes up with data management, interpretation, report summarization, report writing tool that it's built on top of GPT-4 from OpenAI. But then when they fill out the fact sheet, when they are asked about training data, testing data, evaluation, they refer to OpenAI's approach to it as opposed to their own internal and additional safeguard that they put into place or additional data they use to enhance or optimize or fine-tune their product. So in that case, if that happens, it limits cities' ability to properly assess risk, ensure compliance, and establish accountability, because you don't know if the harm happens, which one is responsible, which company. For instance, this is from a fact sheet that was submitted, and it's an example of the vendor's product that was built on Microsoft Azure. It's just powered by OpenAI models. As you see, there are like 3 companies involved in this AI products, at least, even for cloud cybersecurity data. There are so many other companies that they can be involved, but let's just like say that, okay, this is a Gen AI product built on top of Microsoft Azure, which is powered by OpenAI models. And when you look at the fact sheet, when we went through the fact sheet, we saw that so many information. It says, according to Microsoft, according to Azure, according to Microsoft. What are some of the relevant information? Hey, you can look at the information on Microsoft as opposed to our own work for filling out this fact sheet and bringing some information and disclosure. Another theme that I want to speak about is master service agreements and the risk of add-on AI feature. For any software that we use, either as in our personal use or in city, we know that we receive updates, and sometimes we put our updates on automatic updates, because it's a routine software updates that it fixes bugs, it enhances the performance of the software. But sometimes AI can be added as feature. And when it's added on feature without clear notification, it might create an issue. It's like, if now, should I use this product? Should I disable it? And sometimes instead of enabling AI products when it's introduced as a software update, you have to disable it. So it's just like by default, it's enabled. So that creates some kinds of issues and concerns to city officials to, now this software didn't have any AI features. Now the AI feature was added as an add-on. So what should we do? So then that brings the kinds of legal, privacy, or accountability implication. And sometimes when we had a conversation with researchers, it was mentioned that some master service agreements are very long and fragmented. And as a result, when they want to look at clauses about AI or about the amount of data that AI uses to train and optimize and make it better, make the service better, then the language, it's just lost and it's impossible to find it. Not impossible, I'm exaggerating, but it's very difficult and time consuming to understand what are some of the clauses that are applicable in master service agreement when it becomes super long and fragmented. As an example, for instance, US Congress first, it banned the use of Microsoft AI Copilot on the basis of concerns about data privacy and data dependency of the Copilot, although recently there have been so much encouragement about the use of Gen AI by public officials. Zendesk is another example of company that public officials or in cities or public sector they use for customer service. Recently, they announced that they want to have AI agents. Zoom, that we currently use as a platform, they add Zoom AI Companion. So one after another software, they are adding AI-enabled feature. The third theme I wanted to bring to attention is public engagement in AI procurement, because there's so much hype, speed, innovation about the use of AI and particularly Gen AI in the work of the cities. Sometimes public engagement is perceived as a very time-consuming process, is perceived as something that should be done later in the project to get some formal approval. But we have seen examples of cities that they try to bring public during the problem definition, during the very, very early stage of not even thinking about buying AI, but thinking about problem. And they have been trying to do it meaningfully by recruiting citizens to come for several months to the city, having a workshop. Their participation was compensated. They would get certificate. They would get training about some of the terms used to have this meaningful engagement. So that's very important, and we commend Long Beach for having these initiatives. And in our conversation with other city officials, we realized sometimes they utilize the role of advisory bodies, commissioners, city council, to engage the public in AI procurement processes. And but for instance, Oakland specifically has a privacy commission that people, the commission itself, as a representative of the public, they try to be engaged in the procurement processes. But as we know, not all cities, they have advisory commissions that are about surveillance or privacy or anything that can be related to AI. I want to stop here, and I want to continue our conversation with our esteemed panelists, including Dr. Giselle Waters. She's a co-founder of AI Procurement Lab and the chair of IEEE Working Group, P3119 standard for the procurement of AI. We will be talking with Leila Doughty, privacy and AI analyst of City of San Jose, and the person who has been leading GovAI Coalition, that we will be talking about it as well. And Cynthia Cook, my longtime collaborator, who is currently the Director of Research and Policy at Collaborative Research Center for Resilience. I am going to stop sharing my screen and ask my first question from Dr. Waters about the work that she has been doing at IEEE, because first I know Giselle from the amazing work that she has been doing at IEEE and this standard for AI procurement. And I want to ask Giselle, could you please describe what IEEE P3119 is and why is it relevant to procurement of AI in the US public sector and in particular in cities?
Not a big question at all. Thank you for having me. I'm honored. I actually worked with Cynthia Cook on this. She was my first, our first vice chair for the standard, and it began about almost 4 years ago in July in 2021. I've been working with IEEE. IEEE is, for those that may not know, is the largest professional technical standards development organization in the world. And it has been producing all sorts of standards and technology for a long, long time, almost 80 years. Some of them that you use every day, for example, are those for Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and there's a ton of smart city standards that IEEE offers as well. 3119 actually has been accepted by the review committee, and it is going to be published in June. So it lost the P. It now only is 3119 2025. And it is offering 6 processes to adapt your procurement of AI purchases, and specifically high-risk AI purchases. So we're focusing on those that are not, the chatbots that are just going to get you to your account, but really AI systems that are about healthcare, about employment, about critical infrastructure, about welfare services, public services in general. And it offers 6 processes across this 4 years with a working group of international experts, ranging from human-centered design like myself to computer science, systemic systems engineering, AI development, law, and policy. We decided that 6 processes were necessary, originally 5, but they start with the problem definition process. I don't know if it's good I can pull up a slide. Is that possible? It just as a visual, as a background, that might be helpful. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that would do great. Sure.
Okay, all right, let's do a slideshow. I do view slideshow. Okay, so then I'll share. Let's see if you guys can view this screen. Yes? Do I have, I can't see you because now you're behind my screen.
We don't see it, Giselle.
Okay, let's see how I do this. Do I have the opportunity to share? Ah, here we go. That's what it is. I needed to press the button share. Now do you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, lovely. So here are the 6 processes. I won't belabor you with the details. The details are here in this middle section and row, but they range from problem definition all the way through to contract monitoring, building from testing first any procurements that you might have for AI. Again, procurement really was decided because it is the gatekeeper to not letting the bad stuff in, as my co-founder always says, and it is an opportunity for you to really encourage responsible and trustworthy AI, and procurement is that function. It's a mechanism by which you can say, at least for high risk AI, hey, think about it. Let's do and conduct additional due diligence, and these 6 processes represent that due diligence. So you range from defining the problem, preparing a solicitation for a variety of things. We have almost 26 annexes that are tools helping you conduct and achieve all of these 6 processes, moving through to testing and assessing vendor evaluation, their AI governance maturity. Specifically, there's approximately 14 questions on that one, and over 44 questions on the solution evaluation, until you have some risks identified through a variety of these tools, have addressed a procurement risk register that helps you now build contract negotiations with specific contract clauses that are informed by these inputs from the prior 4 processes. And it all ends with and culminates in this contract monitoring, which is the risk controls for the procurement for high risk AI. So it is a standard that is voluntary, but it is a standard now in the absence of regulation, and especially even the threat of state and city and local jurisdiction regulation of AI, even currently proposed today, that allows you a way to really adapt your procurement to the possibility of purchasing AI. This is not for what you've already done, although it can inform AI enablements. This is really about you conducting processes that layer on top of your existing procurement models and your existing procurement approaches with additional due diligence. So it is a how-to. This is not this is not principles. This is not just sort of a high-level guidance. This is really boots on the ground tools with rubrics, with answers that are exemplary that you can refer to or not. It is really deep, and I'm very proud of the work, and the working group has been really laboring over this. We drafted 8 versions of this standard and finally got it approved by IEEE in 2 ballots. So that is the standard. I can stop sharing there, and I hope that gives you a little idea of both A, IEEE, and B, the standard that is coming.
Many thanks, Giselle. We are very much looking forward to June. Thank you so much. And maybe it will be good. We will come back specifically to question about negotiation and monitoring. But because you mentioned it's a standard boots on the ground in the lack of regulation, in the absence of regulation. So what do we have as a voluntarily work? So I want to go to Leila, because speaking of boots on the ground, how these standards, these voluntarily frameworks, they can be implemented. I have to say that I was in awe by the work of GovAI Coalition and the amount of engagement that it's going into place. But I didn't want to talk about it during our presentation, although we talked about that in our report. And I want to ask you, Leila, that if you could describe what GovAI Coalition is, and if you tell me how, through GovAI Coalition, this responsible AI procurement can be promoted.
Absolutely. First off, thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor to be on the panel. And Roya, congratulations on the report. Great presentation. And I'm so excited for the report to come out. So thank you so much. But just to share with folks, in addition to doing privacy and AI governance at the City of San Jose, our team also manages the GovAI Coalition. And the coalition really at its heart started out being primarily about procurement, and that is still very much a major focus of the coalition today. Some of you in the audience today may have heard of the coalition, or you might even be members. I saw some familiar names in the chat. But if you're not familiar, the GovAI Coalition was founded in November 2023 by the City of San Jose and a handful of other agencies. And as of today, we're now at over 700 agencies and 2,000 practitioners from government, civil society, and the private sector, all united in our mission to promote responsible AI in the public sector. Thank you for dropping that link in the chat, Kate. The scope of the coalition it's grown over time. Today, there's a lot of focus on use cases and data governance, but the main motivation for the coalition coming together was to promote greater transparency from vendors during the public procurement process, exactly what we are talking about today. And I'll just share a little bit of the background because I think it's relevant here. At San Jose, when we were first implementing our AI governance framework in like 2022, 2023, we started asking vendors for those AI nutrition facts, the AI fact sheet for their AI products, things like performance metrics, training data, bias, and some vendors were responsive, but mostly we got radio silence, especially from those larger companies, the household names. And we talked to other agencies and learned that this was a common problem, not just something that we were facing at San Jose. And so we decided to leverage our power in numbers, and thus the coalition was formed. And so it really became not just one city asking for those AI nutrition facts, but today we have hundreds of agencies who are demanding that transparency through the procurement process. And so we've actually seen this create a noticeable shift in the industry, and vendors who were unresponsive before, they're now asking how they can get involved, and they're sharing this information with us, which I think is really important. So procurement is critical. Just to echo everyone else today, it's really one of the main policy mechanisms that governments have. But I think especially local governments who have less regulatory power than, say, their state or federal counterparts. And if you look at the coalition's policy templates, you'll see that much of our governance framework is built around procurement and how we can use our buying power to influence the private sector. So Roya, to more directly answer your question, the coalition has done a number of things to promote responsible AI procurement. First, like we've mentioned, the coalition has created policy templates that agencies can use during the procurement process. So we've already mentioned the AI fact sheet. That's a document that collects the nutrition facts. We also have a template for an AI impact assessment, which can help agencies assess risk during the procurement process. Another template that we have is the vendor agreement. That's a standard legal addendum, or you could say standard contractual clauses that can be included in an AI contract, which has requirements related to responsible AI. And then finally, we have something called the AI Governance Handbook. It's kind of like a manual, and it walks you through in detail how you can actually use these templates, how you can conduct a risk assessment, and continue to monitor the systems after they're deployed, which is really important. So if you're curious, you can find all of those and more resources on the coalition's webpage, which I believe is in the chat. And then secondly, this work around procurement is very much ongoing. If you're interested in learning more and getting involved, we have a procurement committee, which is very active, and I encourage you to join. Right now, we have some amazing, bright people leading fantastic work around creating best-in-class contracts and leveraging cooperative procurement opportunities, shareable contracts for our coalition members. So procurement is really a big focus for the coalition. And if you're interested, we have many resources available.
Many thanks, Leila, and thanks for all your work in this. And one thing that I like about GovAI Coalition is not only it's for city officials to join. We joined as researchers. I know so many academics, they join nonprofit and civil society organization. They join the working group. And they are very active in the process of developing the templates and participating in vendor demos and vendor presentation and questions they ask. And that brings me to a question to Cynthia as a member of civil society organization, as a researcher, as a lawyer, as a former public defender who is looking for data. You know, later you mentioned that vendors now they are required to produce their nutrition fact sheet, and you received the silence in the beginning. And I can think that from the research perspective, how these types of information may become important, you know, template vendor agreements and policy template, AI fact sheet template. But then if they are filled out and if they are accessible, then that becomes a question as well, that how they are being filled out, how meaningful they are. So that brings me a question to Cynthia as a researcher, that when you wanted to work on AI procurement, responsible AI procurement of cities, what are some of the key challenges you have encountered as a researcher to trying to access the city procurement data on AI projects?
Yeah, thank you, Roya. I'm excited for this presentation and to be on this panel with you all. As Roya mentioned, I really started to research questions about procurement and digital technology contracts before there ever was a GovAI coalition. And really back in 2016, 2018, when from the Public Defender's Office, we started to see a lot of forensic and surveillance technology vendors come into courtrooms and make arguments that we felt were very squarely in conflict with constitutional rights, like the Confrontation Clause, versus the contractual understanding about confidential data, for example. And so that's really where the thread for me started. And I just started pulling it back and back because, of course, once you realize at the stage where your client has been the subject of technology, once you realize then that the technology isn't working the way that it was sold to, well, you're not going to solve that problem through one criminal case. You really need to pull that thread all the way back to procurement and start asking questions about how that technology can be better vetted at the procurement stage to make sure that not only that one client, but the many other people who will be impacted by that technology are also protected. In going further, we started off back then just really researching all of the available contracts with the same company across different jurisdictions and comparing the different contract terms and specifically how those contract terms treated in public interest concerns like transparency, like indemnification, like who is accountable if this particular technology is implicated in someone's wrongful conviction, who is implicated if it wrongfully terminates benefits, or if it otherwise violates in many of the possible ways someone's constitutional rights. How is a municipality protecting itself from municipal liability for having a technology that sort of embodies the policies, patterns, or practices of some unconstitutional principle, because that would create a great deal of liability if it did. In researching these across different jurisdictions, we have a variety of obstacles. Sometimes those obstacles are related to the pilot nature of a technology, so it's harder to research. There's less information available. There's less of an assessment. Sometimes pilots are not included in a mandatory reporting about algorithms used in a place, for example. The other kind of access issue can just be in the context of the master service agreements that you mentioned. I did a FOIL for a master service agreement in New York City, and I got 19 very unrelated documents back from the comptroller here. And it wasn't clear that anyone else knew where the rest of the documents were. There was definitely a whole lot of other work that company did in New York, but none of the 19 documents had any relevance to that. And so if you wanted to ask a question about, for example, how much a chatbot costs, how would you actually figure that out, especially if the chatbot went off the rails and was, giving back very bad information to the public that was using it? So we've been trying to figure out ways to make public access to that kind of information more clear. The public is encountering chatbots and other types of AI technology in their daily lives. And just like they have questions for government agency staff when they're encountering policies that are implicating their daily life, they have questions about this technology and how it impacts their daily life, and most importantly, about how they can impact its use in their communities, especially when it is causing harm.
Many thanks, Cynthia. And I praise you for receiving that 19 documents through FOIA, because for my previous project, when I applied for FOIA for federal agencies, I received none. So that's great news, exactly. You mentioned that across different jurisdictions, when you look at contracts, or you saw that there are differences or inconsistency in clauses. That brings me to the remarks that Giselle she delivered, and the slide that she showed. Giselle, you talked about the fifth one and sixth one was about contract negotiations and contract monitoring. So I would say that what Cynthia noticed in the differences across jurisdiction, it's something that probably it has relevance to contract negotiation and how cities they can negotiate for different clauses to be included, excluded from a contract, and contract monitoring. If you can describe a little bit, share what could be some of the clauses that should be put into contract during the contract negotiation, that it makes us closer to be confident about responsible AI procurement.
Thank you. Our information and our research really are informed by the EU's first instance of understanding how important it is. Originally, the City of Amsterdam drew up categories of model contract clauses that are relevant for AI. And the City of Amsterdam's original approach in categories led to the EU creating both low risk and high risk model contract clauses. But they, as we did our research in the working group at IEEE, being informed by and inspired by their work, what we landed on were a set of 5 different categories that should receive much greater scrutiny. I'm not going to go into the text language, but the categories start with really addressing the risks of AI in terms of liability and defending the public interest. The first category is use case intent. Use case intent, although an AI developer might have intended and built out an AI system for X, the reality is it's not going to necessarily be used as X in a particular use case context. It's going to be XI or maybe XII. There's like intent does not always match the purpose for the actual AI system. So use case intent and clauses surrounding that category are super important. The second one is, of course, data requirements, and all sorts of data requirements. Data requirements for legacy information technology has a breadth to it that it has been well known for decades and decades. However, for AI, because AI is data and data is AI, the depth and the risk with which is necessary to ask more and be diligent about more data requirements is tremendous. So there is a whole bunch of subcategories beneath the data category model clause category. Then there's, of course, AI function, and how is it actually functioning? Because those types of clauses in MSAs and SLAs are never clear. They might be clear to the AI vendor, but they're certainly not clear to the users, end users, deployers, and now buyers and buyers that are deployers, as declared in even some state laws. So AI functioning and all clauses related to how it actually performs is super important. And then there's a fourth category of AI monitoring and how you will use performance metrics and other types of metrics in order to actually oversee and govern the AI itself, monitor the AI itself. Many clauses that would be relevant in that category. And then the last one is the actual risk mitigation scheduling. So what will you do? How will you do it? Of monitoring what happens, say, in a breach, a trigger gets notified. All that type of scheduling and monitoring needs its own set of clauses, model clauses that would be used. So in the standard, for example, we approach contract negotiation and model contract clauses from the stance of those 5 different clause categories.
Thank you very much, Azal. And about model clauses and intent, you mentioned AI functions, data dependencies should be part of the negotiation and clauses, metrics, risk mitigation and strategies. But when we were working on this project, we realized it's easy for cities to go to certain vendors and say that, yes, include these clauses, and it's hard for other companies, depending on the vendor and relationship and leverage and the power of the vendor versus city, it's something that they can include or exclude. So I was wondering, Leila, because GovAI Coalition, you mentioned, are like more than 300 cities involved in the coalition. So I was wondering how this kinds of cooperative power, how this like a collective power, it can help us to reach to the procurement that it's more responsibly. If you could describe it.
Yeah, that's a great connection. Thanks for the question. A couple things here. The coalition has really been more recently leaning into cooperative procurement opportunities. Before I share those, though, I do want to clarify for anyone who might be unfamiliar. I myself was unfamiliar until very recently with cooperative procurements, but a cooperative procurement results in a shareable contract that other government agencies can use, or it's called like piggyback off of, to purchase that same good or service for their organization. So for example, if one agency has a contract with an AI vendor and that contract has shareable language in it, other agencies can use that same contract to enjoy basically the same terms with that vendor. So it can be especially helpful for smaller agencies who might not have the same leverage that that lead agency initially had. But so first off, if your agency is interested in cooperatives, the coalition has partnered with a platform called Pavilion to create what we call the AI Contract Hub. I can share a link in the chat in just a second. But it's a repository where coalition members can view shareable AI contracts that they can piggyback off of with other agencies. So agencies can kind of peruse that and see if that there's something there that they want to leverage for their own agency. And if you're a coalition member, you can access that repository. In addition to that, the City of San Jose's purchasing team and procurement committee are working together to lead a cooperative procurement for a multi-package AI solicitation. So that package includes things like AI for data cleaning, AI for predictive analytics, and then AI for like business automation. And so once that solicitation is complete, hopefully by the end of this year, if everything goes according to plan, other agencies are going to be able to leverage the resulting AI solutions for their organization. And that project is really aiming to develop what we call a best-in-class set of solicitation documents and processes that other public entities can then replicate and use when they procure AI tools on their own. That's kind of a lot of procurement language. So you might be asking, what does that really mean? What's that going to look like? Through this process, we are really aiming to do our best to embed certain preferences or requirements around responsible AI into the RFP, into the evaluation of the proposed solutions. So if all goes to plan, that resulting contract is going to be one that really incorporates those responsible AI requirements for the specific use cases that I mentioned. And because the contract is going to have shareable language in it, other agencies are going to be able to piggyback off of it and enjoy the same responsible AI protections that are in there. So I think here, the takeaway kind of from cooperatives is that getting it right once can really have multiplicative effects in terms of how many agencies are using it responsibly. And so I think cooperative procurement can really help save cities a lot of upfront work and help them streamline buying and using AI responsibly.
Many thanks, Leila. And I'm going to, Cynthia, ask one last question that is relevant what Leila mentioned. And because I know that you often take a very, the approach that you think that how big tech companies, they might perceive these types of cooperative agreements versus the smaller. So I wanted to predict, to hear your prediction that how do you think big companies, they might perceive these types of work that is cooperative agreement with all the AI clauses and say that either this or not, and we will leave. So how do you think that tech companies, they might perceive these types of model clauses, strong model clause?
First, I just want to say how important I think it is, because otherwise you have situations like when we did our contract scan in 2018, the same company would have confidential data clauses with one city and then defer to a different city's preference for transparency. And so by aligning city values around the public sector and public sector interests, I think that a coalition like the Pavilion platform allows is a really strong way for cities to really set the groundwork for what they expect tech to do for them, so that it's not the other way around. And what the other way around looks like, really quickly, if you watch, the AI hearing from the fall in New York City, is it looks like a vendor who decides when a chatbot is ready instead of an agency. It looks like a vendor who decides not to submit answers to mandatory reporting. It looks like instead of the city being in charge of what's happening with the vendor's in charge. And that doesn't serve our cities well. And so I would hope that tech companies who want to have long-term relationships with the cities they seek to serve would really invite the kind of consolidation of city interests into the kind of contract language and articulation of what their values are that GovAI seeks to build.
Many thanks. We hope so, with the help of GovAI, and how strongly they can, this cooperative and collaborative and collective approach can be so strong in pushing for responsible AI procurement. With that, I will go to our audience question. Many thanks for the ones that added their questions, and we hope to address all of them very quickly. So the first question is from Leila, and it says, given your location, can you speak to your ability to access engineering resource to participate in public sector procurement?
Yeah, thanks, Roy. And I'd also just included a quick answer for this one in the chat. But the coalition really welcomes participation from folks from the private sector and local AI expert as well to participate. I think if you're interested, the Industry Relations Committee is a great place to begin plugging in. That committee is working on putting together a registry of various AI fact sheets, and also starting to do a little bit of work of evaluation that Roya, I think you mentioned earlier on. The first step with the fact sheets is just getting that information. The next step is then investigating the quality of information that you receive on there. So that's some work that committee is beginning to embark on. And feel free to reach out to me. I can drop my email in the chat if you'd like to follow up and have any other questions.
Wonderful, thank you. And we have another question that it says, we have discussed procurement for responsible AI, and I was wondering more about work done regarding limitations or barriers Specifically, what are the potential negative use cases of AI we should be focusing on? It's open to all panelists.
I mean, I'm happy to jump in to say that if you haven't yet read Inescapable AI by Tectonic Justice, they outline negative use cases very clearly on page 5, where AI was used to cut in-home care for 4,000 disabled people in Arkansas, despite having medical conditions that have not gotten better. They falsely accused 40,000 people in Michigan of unemployment insurance fraud, and subjected 4 million people in Texas to the potential loss of health insurance through a labyrinth Medicaid enrollment system that even agency staff cannot navigate. That's just a short quote from a great report. I think it's a short quote even from the summary of the report. So I would recommend checking out that report for all of the potential really risky use cases out there.
Many thanks. And I saw, Giselle, you also shared the document about negative AI use cases. Thank you very much to other articles. And the last question is about environmentally sustainable AI. And I know that, Kate, you responded that there will be another webinar organized by AAAS Center about the environmental impacts of AI and how to deploy them sustainably on June 11th. If there are any addition that the panelists they would like to add about the sustainable deployment of AI, sustainable development of AI.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that webinar, and then we'll also follow up with additional resources because GovAI Coalition is putting out some great resources on that too, led by Layla and others. So we'll get that registration in the link. Actually, Joanna already did it, so thank you, Joanna. I want to thank Roya and all the panelists for doing such a fabulous job of walking us through this complicated and incredibly important topic of AI procurement. And at this point, Chris and I are going to wrap up by giving you a few resources and encouraging you to fill out the webinar survey so we know what's useful to you and what you want to see in the future. So speaking of procurement, we wanted to share one resource that we created in collaboration with Layla and the GovAI Coalition to help city leaders kind of look under the hood of AI systems. And it's called The Key Questions Government Leaders Can Ask when Considering the Use of AI in the Public Sector. The link is in the chat. And Chris, I'm going to send it over to you to wrap us up.
Sure. Thanks, Kate. And thank you to everyone, our panelists. This was just fascinating. And thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to share with us about your important work. There was a lot of information, so we are going to follow up with an email after this just to make sure that all those links and resources are in one place so everyone can continue to learn and collaborate. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now. This is to a survey. We would love to hear about your thoughts on this webinar as we plan additional content related to AI and data centers. We will have another webinar on June 11th on data centers, energy use, and water use. And we'll think about how cities and local governments can consider how to negotiate data centers in their jurisdictions and how ordinances can be applied to data centers. So with that, thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your days. Again, you'll hear from us shortly with those resources. And thanks again to our panel. Great job, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.